So good morning everyone and welcome to the webinar. I'm Siobhan Martin from the Scottish Local Government Digital Office, and today we are joined by Sally Kerr from the City of Edinburgh Council, who is leading the Open Innovation Project for the Digital Partnership. And she is also joined by Jean-Claude Cornan, Marie Keller and Florian Weiser from the University of Edinburgh. And they will all take part in this morning's presentation. So the webinar today will explore the work that the Digital Office have been doing with the University of Edinburgh surrounding the development of a detailed and practical innovation process which has been tailored to suit the needs of Scottish local government. So our presentation this morning will be between sort of 20 and 30 minutes, and as usual we will have an opportunity at the end to ask any questions to any of the presenters on today's webinar. So if you do have any questions throughout, we would encourage you to use the chat box, and those questions will come through and we will pick them up during the session after the presentation. And you'll also have an opportunity today to raise your hand, which you will see on your system, and we can unmute you if you want to ask a question via the microphone. So today's webinar will be recorded and to be accessed at a later date. We will be uploading this onto our YouTube channel, and we will be sharing slides afterwards as well. So we would encourage you to be sharing this with your colleagues who may be interested in any aspect of the Open Innovation Project from the Digital Office. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Marie Keller from the University of Edinburgh, who is going to kick off the presentation. So Marie, without further ado.
Okay. Thanks, Siobhan, for the introductions. And thanks everyone for joining the webinar. I will start just by giving a little bit of background to who we are and why we're doing this project. So as Siobhan already said, we're Florian, Jean-Claude and myself, Marie. And our project aim was to develop a detailed and really practical open innovation process that is tailored to the needs of Scottish local government. And from talking or from our conversations with Sally and also Molly Kerr from the Edinburgh Council, there seem to be three main reasonings behind this overall aim. First, that most open innovation processes and frameworks are created for the private sector and not really applicable to the public sector. Second, there's little practical guidance for inexperienced councils and who also have different levels of knowledge. And there seems to be currently a tendency to jump to solutions instead of really thinking about the root cause of the problem. We started by approaching this project with secondary research, mainly academic frameworks, but also a lot of case studies from the public sector about open innovation. And then it was really crucial for us to understand the work and issues in Scottish councils. So we held a workshop with 3 different councils. We had someone from Edinburgh Council there, 5 in East Lothian, and from the Digital Office. And additionally, we held some follow-up interviews with West Dunbartonshire and Highland Council. And what we did in the workshop was to co-develop a first open innovation process. And we then sort of with the interviews wanted to test those and get some feedback. And in the third step, we then merged the co-design process with the findings from the secondary research. One of what we discovered when doing the secondary research was that the current open innovation definition from the private sector does not really convey the benefits that open innovation can actually bring to councils. So we therefore adapted the second half of Henry Chesbro's open innovation definition to a working definition for this project, and also to sort of create a joint understanding of what open innovation is. So it is the use of purposive inflows and outflows of knowledge for the development of new and improved public services and for enhancing citizen engagement. So this already touches upon some of the benefits that open innovation can bring. And we'll want to show some more of those benefits. because we feel like it's really important to understand that open innovation is really beneficial and is not just an additional effort. And yeah, so there are some benefits around service development. So open innovation can really improve public services, especially by having a citizens focus and really having citizen-centered service design. It can also reduce innovation costs. That sort of implies that there have been innovation costs already, but it can also just mean cost reduction in general, or even translate to other resource savings such as time or staff availability. And yeah, and it also increases employee engagement. Then further, there are some specific benefits such as improved transparency and accountability, which is especially important for the public sector, as they're more in the public eye than maybe organizations in the private sector. And it further can increase citizen participation depending on the approach that will be taken. From talking to council members and having some interviews, we found that there's not really one common understanding of what open innovation is, and also what different approaches there are. Because open innovation is really an umbrella term for many different approaches of engaging in open innovation. And these different approaches can be clustered into 3 different areas: competition-based, collaboration-based, and hybrid. The competition-based approaches include hackathons, but also accelerator competitions such as CIFTech, and there's I think also a webinar about that, idea competitions or design competitions. Then there are some collaboration-based approaches such as crowdsourcing, which is actually rather citizen sourcing in the context of Scottish local authorities, living labs, co-design, but also university partnerships or using industry clusters. So if there are any industry clusters in your geographical area, then really use it. And then there are some hybrid approaches, mainly around open data, because open data is more can be used in various ways, so it cannot just apply to competition or collaboration. From the workshop and the interviews, we identified 5 main problem areas in Scottish local authorities, and that we really wanted to take into account when creating an open innovation process. First, some gaps in expertise and knowledge. For example, having a problem but not really knowing how to take that further in the process or where to go for decisions. Then there are some structural obstacles, such as the speed of decisions or not having data, like customer data or citizen data, centralized in one place. Then resource issues, such as the lack of budget or staff time and availability. And then everyone we talked to really agreed on the need for leadership promotion and support, and really having a safe space to test new things and new approaches, and that there are currently some risk-averse decision makers, and there's really a need for one person promoting this new approach. And finally, some change-averse mindset and culture in councils, which can refer to being driven by savings, but also having that solution focus instead of really thinking about the root cause of a problem. And these problem areas really helped us when developing the open innovation process, because we really wanted it to be as practical as possible in a council environment. Yeah, and I will now pass over to Florian, who will explain the process in further detail. Give us a minute for that.
Yeah, thank you, Marie, for the first part. I will now talk about the proposed process. We developed this process based on the co-designed version from the workshop, which we matched with further primary and secondary research findings. And the outcome is a process that is tailored to challenge-focused inbound open innovation projects. Inbound means that it is about innovation and ideas flowing into councils rather than out of the councils, which would be outbound open innovation. The process is balanced between generalized yet detailed and specific proposal to be of value for most of the councils. Here you can see an overview of the process we developed, and I will talk about it in detail on the next slides. We focused mainly on the first half of the process before the split happens, which is centered around problem definition and the discovery of solution ideas. As Marie mentioned, that there are different approaches to open innovation, including a collaboration and a competition-based approach, we inserted this split. The pathway at the top is for competition-based approaches, while the pathway at the bottom is for collaboration-based approaches. And the last 4 steps are then again shared. In terms of roles, we identified 3 key roles within the process, or these are roles that we propose to use when going through the process. These are the innovation leader, challenge champion, and the project team. The innovation leader is the key responsible within the council for open innovation. So that's the person which really is engaged in finding challenges that could fit for open innovation projects and that supports the execution of the process. The challenge champion is identified for each challenge individually and is an expert on the chosen project and is in charge of taking the project through the process and delivering a satisfactory solution in the end. It is also the person that leads the project team. So the project team consists of challenge and innovation experts, preferably from also the department where the challenge appears, and supports the challenge champion by facilitating the collaboration across departments and with different stakeholders, and also by just supporting the work so work can be split up. Now I want to talk through the process a bit more in detail. So as you can see, there are 3 main elements for the process. There are the process steps, decision points, and tools to use to facilitate the execution of each of those steps. We also have checklist items for the most important steps, and I will present one example of that later. We will give an overview today, and we have a more detailed version of that in form of an Excel sheet that we will share with Sally Kerr, and I guess she can forward that to other councils who are interested in it. So starting with the first step, we propose an innovation funnel so that all challenges are collected in one central point. And then in the second step, evaluated and chosen by the innovation leader. The challenges that are chosen here are not automatically open innovation challenges. They are just challenges that are potentially big enough and important enough to be considered for an open innovation approach. The assessment then happens in the third step with the opportunity and fact finding. Here, all the facts about the problem are identified, and the opportunity behind the solved challenge is also considered. So basically, what will be the impact of a solved challenge? If this leads to the decision that the challenge should be solved through an open innovation approach, the challenge champion is identified at this stage. We also recommend to include senior leadership here to really get their buy-in and support for an open innovation project. Moving forward, the fourth step was included due to conversations we had with the councils we talked to. They told us, and Marie also mentioned that as one of the main bottlenecks, that resource constraints, especially budget restrictions, are a big challenge for many councils. So we proposed to, at an early stage, to talk about the resources needed as well as the resources available, with the relevant stakeholders, and that would be the job of the challenge champion. It is important to mention that this is just the starting point of this conversation, and that it should be an ongoing conversation throughout the process that also informs then the decision of how to solve the problem. The next step is landscaping, and those of you who listened to the first Open Innovation webinar might be familiar with this. So landscaping basically means looking for all the information one can find about the challenge. This includes what are potential root causes, what are potential solutions, are there any solution providers that could be relevant at a later stage. So to just gather all the information that is out there, mainly based on desk-based research, to then inform the next step, the problem solution and definition workshop. During this workshop, the challenge champion and the project team come together to really create a concise problem definition and to develop first solution ideas. Some of you might think it is quite late in the process to define the problem here. Well, we saw this tendency of councils to jump to a solution, and we really wanted to avoid this by doing all the information gathering before to then make an informed decision of what the problem really is. Because if you don't define the problem properly and don't tackle the actual root cause, a solution will never be satisfactory or sustainable. And there's a nice quote from Albert Einstein who once said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions. And that's somehow the idea behind it. For doing the workshop, we propose following the creative problem solving framework. This is the framework that consists of 4 stages: clarify, ideate, develop, and implement, and then 6 steps. So as you can see, the first 2 steps have already been done during the process. So the explore the vision is basically the opportunity finding, and gathering data has been done through the landscaping. So within the workshop, you can immediately start with formulating a challenge, which you can also call defining the problem or coming up with a problem definition, then exploring potential ideas, really brainstorming, being creative, thinking out of the box, what could solve the problem, to then formulate specific solution ideas, and the best one is then chosen by the challenge champion and the project team, and a plan is formulated. This workshop really informs the next step, which is choosing the open innovation approach to go for. So the 2 options you have is the competition-based approach and the collaboration-based approach. The competition-based approach uses the problem definition from the problem definition workshop, and the collaboration-based approach uses the problem solution ideas from the workshop. Now I want to talk about the competition pathway. So the competition pathway starts with a challenge description, and then the invitation of participants, the execution of the competition, and after that the best solution is basically chosen and taken forward into the prototyping stage. Now, this is really important, steps 12 and 13, prototyping and testing the solution. When talking to councils, especially people from the procurement departments, they mentioned several times that they're currently forced into buying products by suppliers without really testing them, which leads to suboptimal procurement. So we really think that's one of the big benefits of open innovation. You are in this conversation, direct conversation with the supplier. You're developing something together. So you should really prototype and test solutions and iterate as much as you need to come up with a satisfactory solution. And a potential framework to follow there is the build, measure, learn approach. Some might know from the lean startup, lean innovation area. When reaching a satisfactory solution, you can then implement the solution and evaluate and report in the end. As I mentioned, we have some checklist items, and here is one example for the eighth step for the challenge description. So as you can see, it just gives you a couple of points you need to go through, and you should make sure to address before moving forward to the next stage. So that starts with defining clear requirements of outcome, but also clearly identifying key performance indicators, and goes as far as receiving clearance from executive level and involving procurement and finance colleagues. So in the detailed version of the process, we have these checklist items for most of the steps to really make sure you don't forget things and you get guided throughout the process. The collaboration pathway looks quite similar to the competition pathway, as the 4 last steps are shared. The difference here is that it starts basically with the solution ideas developed in the problem solution workshop, and the best of those solutions. And this is taken to find and shortlist potential partners and to start a discussion whether that's a solution idea that would be achievable, or if you need to twist it a bit, and then after these conversations, the best partner is chosen, and then again the product or service is developed and implemented in the end. I will now hand over to Jean-Claude, who will talk about how this process can be implemented or should be implemented within the councils.
Okay, thank you, Florian. So for the recommendations, we divided the recommendations into 2 categories. The short-term recommendations, this is the category that focuses on the process, and council long-term recommendations. So for the short-term recommendations, we started with an open innovation possibilities workshop. We see this as being basically a place where the team that is interested in doing open innovation collectively, they come together to come up with a definition for what open innovation is, and understand the different possibilities for open innovation in that particular council. So it's really this this day or half a day that is dedicated to really getting the whole team on board with a common understanding of what open innovation is. The next step is the selecting of open innovation leaders. So as Flo had outlined, one of the key persons in the open innovation process is an open innovation leader. This person is to be a central point for funneling the knowledge and driving the process forward, as well as this person could be the person that is most informed about how the process works. So whereas the team may have a general knowledge, and we encourage everyone to understand the process and understand what open innovation is, we believe somebody should really be that specialized and dedicated person to both moving it forward as well as committing on a deeper level to understanding open innovation. Next step would be to familiarize with the OI process and tools. So at this stage, the process would be the process that we just outlined, and that can be done through the webinar, and the tools as well as the process would be uploaded to the digital office's website. Currently, there is a website where different innovation resources are stored. So after the webinar, it would be beneficial for this link to this hub on the digital office website to be shared with all the councils, and there will need to be consideration for at least a month or 2 months for the process and the tools to properly be uploaded onto the website. After this, once the team is familiarized with the open innovation process and the tools from the website, the next step would be to adapt the open innovation process to the council context. And we found that this was important because there was no universal structure in the councils in terms of all councils having particular departments or hierarchies or so forth. So we recommend understanding the process proposed and seeing where the process fits into your particular council. The next step would be to identify challenge sources. Now, in this particular context, we're thinking of a pilot. What is one particular challenge source that could be tackled for the pilot? Then the next step would be to familiarize the executive with the pilot buy-in, the ideas behind it, what the council is trying to achieve, and then the actual piloting of the open innovation project. The piloting of the open innovation project, this is where you test the process and the tools, you work it through, you get an understanding of how that actually looks in reality versus in theory, and you get some experience before really saying that yes, this is something that we could competently use. This is the testing phase. Then, of course, evaluating and reporting it. We want to really underscore that there is a strong need for councils to share the experiences from the pilot because this tool is really a starting point and it's meant to be informed by practice. So that sharing is actually a critical part to the last step, which is improving of the process. So for the recommendations for councils for the long term. So while the core consultancy scope focused on developing an open innovation process, our research found that these factors are important to open innovation's long-term success, and open innovation enabling conditions should be explored in future research. So basically, we acknowledge that the process is one path to open innovation as a pilot and as a tool, an innovation tool. But from our research, we understood that open innovation as a civic benefit, as a practice, and even openness as a philosophy requires certain long-term conditions to be developed that might only be captured in applying the process. So these 5 areas are areas that should be considered and actions should be taken, as well as we believe future research could be done on these areas as to building long-term capacity for open innovation. So the areas are, the first is to develop a network. To really do open innovation well in the long term, because it's new in councils, not just in Scotland, but across Europe, it's important to really stay in touch with the different players in open innovation in the public sector and really understand what is happening and how the landscape is developing. So that is important, and we think probably the open innovation leader could do a monthly check-in, but there needs to be some structure around looking and staying in touch with the different councils in the UK and even in Europe on a whole. Next would be the engagement of leadership on open innovation, and we acknowledge that leadership doesn't change their mind overnight around believing in open innovation or not. It takes evidence, it takes constant engagement, and ultimately is a process towards somebody seeing the benefit and the value of open innovation. So the network and the examples from practices of councils throughout Europe would feed well into providing cases that could convince leadership that open innovation is something that should stay in the council. The next is to develop a culture. Open innovation is really about openness. So the culture of openness has to be cultivated. And some of the things that go along with a culture of openness is really things like the freedom of the average employee at any level to be able to share an idea. Councils should ask themselves, how do people contribute to their ideas? Is there openness within the council itself, as well as risk taking? You know, anything innovation related has been found to have some level of risk, and while councils have and public sector is generally a risk-averse space compared to private sector, there needs to be an attitude that failure is okay in certain contexts, and that somebody suggests the idea, they try it, and it doesn't work out, but this is part of what innovation is about. So the next thing is create a structure, and this acknowledges that there would need to be very long-term particular roles. So we have the project team, we have the open innovation leader and so forth, the challenge champion. We mentioned certain things specific to the process, but outside of that, long-term open innovation may mean having specific members of staff dedicated to other things as our understanding of open innovation is developed. And finally, policy. So what we found, and I'll use a particular example around open data, is that open innovation involves new information coming into the council and information coming out of the council. So one particular example we found in Europe was the creation of an open data policy, which outlined the criteria for sharing information externally with the public. So this open data policy could allow the council to be freer and have a more organized approach in sharing data, as well as there should be a policy around how recommendations by citizens are managed and inbound ideas are managed. So now we will move over to questions. This has been the end of our presentation so far, and I will hand it over to Siobhan for the questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Jean-Claude, and thanks very much to all our presenters today. We hope that our attendees have found that very informative. So we will move on to a quick question and answer session now. So if you do have any questions for our presenters this morning, then please pop them in the chat box or raise your hand and listen out for me prompting you to unmute your mic. So while we wait to see if there's any questions for our presenters, we would like to sort of mention that Sally will wrap up this webinar this morning. But the next steps for this open innovation project for the digital office is a workshop with CivTech, which is happening on Thursday, the 2nd of May. It's actually full. Within 4 days, we had all the tickets sold out for that. So if you would be interested in attending that workshop, then please feel free to email ourselves and we can add you to the waiting list. So that's on Thursday, the 2nd of May. So yep, our email address is info@digitaloffice.scot. So please feel free again to add your name to the waiting list for that event. Or if you want to know anything else about the Open Innovation Project or anything else that the Digital Office is working on, we'll be happy to get back to you and explain further. So, Jean-Claude is going to lead on the Q&A for the presenters this morning. So you gently touched earlier on the buy-in for the leadership, Jean-Claude, and you did say it's very important that the leadership doesn't sort of change their mindset overnight, and it's important that we provide evidence to them to try and change that mindset. So would you be able to expand further on how you support operational managers to identify the challenges at the very beginning of the open innovation process?
Okay. By operational managers, you mean the persons in senior leadership outside of the immediate open innovation team, engaging the persons, the executive leadership, or you mean the persons who would actually be as part of the open innovation team?
I think in terms of operational managers, it's those on the ground that are sort of running the services. So, for example, like your waste manager, your recycling manager, how would you sort of get them on board? They might not be directly involved in the open innovation process, but they might be the ones to give that the go ahead for the project team to get started.
Well, for us, we have been, our approach so far focused on the open innovation process around like the funnel and the ideas coming in and the innovation project team, and there would need for sure to be this innovation leader who I think has to do that work around engaging the senior leadership and the leadership needed for particular stages of the open innovation process. So, so the first step would be like for us identifying whose responsibility it would be to have that conversation with the managers, and ultimately there needs to be simplification, I guess, of the pilot, the tools, the goals, some sort of simple presentation around what is trying to be accomplished with open innovation. For us, we acknowledge that we have limited experience in really understanding the councils and like the specific departments and the environments, but what we try to show in the process, and that's why the recommendations really started with this open innovation possibilities workshop, is this general need for the entire team to really be equipped with a basic understanding of open innovation, to be able to champion it and really communicate it in a simple way. One of the things that we found from the councils so far and from like our workshop was that there were many different understandings of open innovation. Councils, even from the digital office and among the councils and people who knew innovation, what open innovation was, the differences led to different perspectives on maybe even what it looks like and how it could be approached. Yeah. So addressing that fundamentally and having somebody responsible for communicating the value of it to these persons and where it would fall in terms of the process, I think that's what I see as being the way to engage the department leaders.
Great, thank you. And you mentioned also about the workshop that you guys carried out with a few local government representatives. What was the biggest challenges of that workshop or that day that you engaged with those reps?
Well, on a whole, if it's okay, I'd like to answer the question from just two perspectives.
Yep.
One, the overall challenges related to the entire project and on that particular day. Some of the challenges on that particular day. So on a whole, for us, it was a project that we had 2 months to pull together. We had to hit the ground running, understand what the deliverable is, figure out whether it was realistic to even propose to do an entire open innovation process, or whether we should focus on one particular section of it. And we were disadvantaged, I think, with time, and it was one of the challenges. So ideally, over a longer term, this process would have involved us engaging with more councils, probably even doing another workshop where we get to see that co-development happen with persons familiar with open innovation, like the Glasgow Council and so forth.
Yep.
On the day itself, though, at the open innovation workshop where the councils came together, it worked out beautifully. We got 2 different processes. There were 2 groups that developed processes. We were able to get the different bottlenecks. We were able to get different ingredients that were important to the open innovation process. So I think on that particular day, we were actually very pleased with the outcome. We didn't feel like there were any issues like from the workshop that affected the development of the tool. The only thing that we wish could have been a little better would have been, I guess, broader perspectives from more persons attending the workshop. And again, with the limitation of time for the project, it affected the times that councils knew about the workshop, being able to kind of commit to it with that short notice. So we think possibly with, as mentioned earlier, a more experienced council like Glasgow that have done open innovation webinars before, it would have been interesting to see what perspectives came forward and how that informed the tool.
Great, thank you very much for that. I don't know if you want to answer this one or if you want to pass over to one of the other guys, but is there any, from your sort of exploration of open innovation across the UK and Europe as a whole, have you got any good examples of public sector innovation from other cities or countries?
Okay, well, since there's the opportunity to pass it over, I'll explain the question to one of my colleagues who will give a few examples. Is that okay?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, great. She asked examples of open innovation in the public sector, specific examples. Specific examples of open innovation in the public sector.
Yeah, I will take that question. Could you repeat the question, please? Hello? Can you hear me?
Sorry, muted myself there.
Yeah.
It was just to see if you had any examples of public sector innovation from any other countries, from what you've explored so far at university.
Yeah. Well, there are really many examples of open innovation, especially in other European countries, but as well as in the UK. So one really good example from the UK is the York Council. They developed an open innovation process themselves together with the European Union and cities in Spain and Italy, and really created a process that was centered around citizen sourcing and an open data platform, and that delivered quite good results in the end. And there's also a big report on that, 80 pages report, which really goes into detail of what they did and what the outcome was. And then there is Barcelona with its Living Lab, and I think most people will be familiar with that. Cities in the Netherlands are also highly engaged in open innovation. Amsterdam has a big platform, created a big platform of different companies, universities, as well as different councils and public sector organizations which are involved and really share challenges and try to solve them together. There's the example of Eindhoven. And then Helsinki in Finland is also a very good example. They are very, very strong when it comes to open data and the testbed approach. So they basically share all their data. Companies can use it, and they provide a stage for those companies to really test the solutions they develop within the city. And if that leads to satisfactory results, the city is more than happy to really take those solutions on board. So these are some examples. I think we also could share some of the links with Sally Kerr, and she can forward it to any councils who might be interested in that.
Yep, definitely. I think we can include those links in the follow-up email. That would be really, really good. And whilst you're on as well, Florian, could you possibly answer the last question we have here? And one of our attendees is saying, if they understood this right, there was a couple of approaches, such as collaboration and competition for open innovation, and they are wondering how they can determine which approach is best to take. Is that sort of on a case-by-case basis?
So this depends basically on a mix of different factors. First, it is about a bit about the experience with the process. So what experience do you already have with the process? Also, resource restrictions. So some of the approaches, like for example, setting up a living lab, is something that requires high resources, requires a lot of money and a lot of time. So it might not be the right choice for every council. And then it's also about the outcome of the problem, solution, and definition workshop. So if you feel that the solution ideas you developed are really good and are satisfactory, it might be the right choice to go for a collaboration-based approach, especially if you know that there are companies out there who could deliver this solution. If you're rather unsure about the solution, a competition-based approach could be the right thing, to really see and invite participants to provide you with solution ideas, and to get more insights into what is possible, and then to choose one of those as an outcome. So these are some of the factors to consider when taking this decision. And I think experience, resources, and then also how confident you are about the solution ideas are maybe the most important factors when doing this.
Great. That's perfect. Thank you very much. So we are at the end of the questions. So it would be good if you could pass over to Sally now to wrap up the webinar. That would be great. Thanks very much for that.
Okay, thanks, Siobhan. I just want to thank all the students for the hard work they carried out, as they pointed out, under quite tight time constraints, and it wasn't the only projects they were doing either. We chose to work with University of Edinburgh Business School because Edinburgh Council had already carried out a previous project with their MSc Innovation and Entrepreneurship course, and we had been really pleased with the outcome. So we really wanted to develop this as part of the Digital Office's Open Innovation project. So I'm more than pleased with the outcomes we achieved. The process that's been developed is really a blueprint, and it's one that the Digital Office project, will now develop further with Scottish councils, fleshing out steps, checklists, tools, and identifying skills that might be required around this. We welcome involvement and want to engage with everyone. So please do get in touch if you would like to contribute to this process or indeed become a pilot council for the process. It's been a great experience working with the students. We gained new insights and knowledge as well as fresh thinking. So thanks again to them for this work.
Thanks very much, Sally. So we've came to the end of the webinar. We hope you found that informative. If you do have any further questions on the webinar or any other work that we are doing around this project or others, then please do feel free to email info@digitaloffice.scot, and I'll pick that up, and someone will get back to you on your query. Please feel free to visit our website, www.digitaloffice.scot also, and that's got all the information about all of our other projects and the deliverables that have came from them to date. So as I mentioned at the beginning, this webinar has been recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, and we will send out a follow-up email later on this afternoon with the useful links that were mentioned throughout the webinar, the slides, and also the link to the recording. So please feel free to share this with your colleagues. And also mentioned earlier on that we have got a partnership of a workshop with CivTech on Thursday the 2nd of May. So if you want to be added to the waiting list for that, then please do drop us an email as well. So that will extend on the collaboration method that we're discussing today for open innovation. So thank you very much to Sally. Thank you very much to the students again for all their hard work. The presentation was absolutely fantastic, and we hope to see you on the next webinar. Thank you.